All right. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you're coming from. We've got a wonderful talk coming up for you. Just going to do a brief intro, a little bit different than our other ones, just to make sure that our screen sharing works properly. But so for those of you that are new here, we're Gomi. Our big thing is trying to expand wilderness medicine to anybody and everyone that wants to hear, get everybody involved and see all of like the different aspects that are out there. Normally we have our QR codes up for our socials. We would really encourage you to go and like and follow us. You can get a lot of really up-to-date information, see all of our future talks that are coming up, and then also sign up for our mailing list for all of those future talks as well. As always, also, it's nice to see faces if you are in a place that is capable of presenting video. If not, we totally understand. But always welcome any and all videos to see faces if possible. If you have any questions while we're going through our presentation today, feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll be keeping track of them as we go to make sure that we don't end up missing any along the way. And Katrina, did I miss anything in kind of like the normal updates with that? No? Okay, cool. So with that, I'll introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Vainio. He's a graduate from SUNY Buffalo, and he's been a little bit of all over the place. He's did his family medicine residency in Utah and has been working up in Alaska for a good long time, seeing a little bit of everything, and has a very long-standing relationship with Himalayan Health Exchange, which you're going to hear a little bit about tonight. And with that, I'll let Shawn take the way.
It's a pleasure to share this information, and I look forward to my 20 years of experience in Himalaya, and hopefully you guys have a lot of questions at the end. You can ask me to do about 45 minutes, 10 minutes at the end for questions, hopefully maybe minutes. And so let's talk. This is my why: 20 years of medical expeditions in the Indian Trans-Himalaya, because really when it comes down to my practice of medicine, this is why I do it. This is why I became a doctor, and what keeps going. In the modern era, I'm sure a lot of you are getting a relative new exposure to pressures and the mental issues that come to affect your practice of medicine. Medicine can get on you a little bit. It can take a little bit of the joy out of it. I envisioned medicine to be when I was in medicine growing up in rural Western Europe. But the organization that I've now worked with gives me an opportunity to intensively work with medical students in rural, high altitude situations with people all the world. And it allows me to take care of in a relatively interesting setting. And it really rekindles my love for medicine. So with that, I'll head forward into the talk here. I apologize, we weren't able to get everything in the regular view instead of trying to go and show screwing things up in Zoom. So take the presentation to the people I take care of, people of the Indian Himalaya. Back in the days when I actually had hair, back about 16 years ago, and you can see just a very dignified, and it's been an absolute pleasure to take Tibetan refugees and the ancient tribal in Himalaya for the last couple decades. This is another photo of women heading high summertime, and a picture of a woman harvesting in the summertime that we've had the ability to take care of as well. So the objectives of this talk, it's a medical talk.
Dr. Vainio, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your connection's coming in and out a little bit, and your slides aren't advancing, I believe, as you are clicking.
Okay. If I slow down, will that help things, or do you have a suggestion?
I think slowing down would probably help as far as like the audio connection. I don't know how cell coverage. Yeah, actually, if you try turning off video, which I know is a really weird thing for Zoom, that sometimes can help with audio stuff. I know that sometimes, I don't know how the phone connection is, but sometimes you can kind of like phone in. Like a telephone call type thing.
Right. I could try going upstairs too. If that works. Just on a tour through my house here. Sorry, guys. See if it's a connection. To Roosevelt Elk from the island of Fognac, north of Kodiak. There's a mountain caribou from the Kenai Peninsula. That's the view out at Alyeska Ski Resort right now. It's a good evening here. Is it coming in any better?
Is a little bit. Can you try taking the video off and seeing how that maybe helps the audio?
Just go straight to audio.
Yeah. And then try with that.
Just go ahead and talk.
Yeah.
Every medical talk kind of has to have these. So experience with a non-political expedition, and number two, a controversy about missions. Number three, an understanding of the benefits, understanding of the unintended short-term medical missions, global health.
Shawn, is there any way that like we could change the audio that you like have a phone? I don't know how the phone connection is up by where you're at. If that might be a better connection, kind of like a telephone call.
Did Zoom connection that you sent me have phone in?
What was that?
You sent me, did it have phone in instructions or no?
Let's see. I think,
If you click the little arrow right next to your microphone, a drop menu should come up, and there's a switch to phone audio about the third selection up from there. And if you click it, it'll give you a telephone number to call in at.
Any of those? Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
just be sure
Is there
to,
any delay or does it seem to be working?
it seems like it's working. Just make sure that you've mute the computer one.
Got it. I'm muted and I'm on the phone now.
Okay, sound quality is perfect.
Well, sorry for all the technical delays there, but that tends to be the way things work out here in rural Alaska. I just ran a diagnostic accuracy conference for the entire state of Alaska and had some of the world's gurus on diagnosis participating with me, and they got to experience what it's like to provide healthcare to people when you're dealing with technical difficulties like this. So I guess we'll just roll with this, unfortunately, just with audio. Wish I could
Yeah.
share all the photos I've had over the past 20 years with you, but we'll just roll with it. Is it working, Ian? Or no?
Shawn, if you want, it is working. Well, the audio is working. If you want to upload the presentation to the link that I sent you, I can share the slides. You just have to tell me to move through the slides then. Sorry for all the technical stuff, everyone.
Oh, that's all right, man. We'll work through it here. Did you you just emailed me that link?
Yeah, I just emailed it to you, to your Gmail. If once that upload starts, if you want to just kind of go ahead and
Go
talk
ahead and
though,
talk.
I'll work on getting it up then.
Yeah. All right, it's going.
All right.
All right. So, like I said, the objectives of this would be to get some exposure to a non-political, non-religious medical expedition program that incorporates service, teaching, and local medical involvement, understand the controversy behind experiences in global health, develop an understanding of the benefits of those experiences and unintended consequences. I am, as a disclosure, I'm an unpaid advisor to the Himalayan Health Exchange, the organization I've been working with for 20 years. And I used to be a member of the board of the now defunct nonprofit side of that. But I don't receive any money for the work I do. I just do it because that's what I love. So how did I get involved in all this? You know, it was a dream of mine when I was first in medical school. Google was becoming popular back in 1999, and I was sitting in the computer lab at the University of Buffalo between classes, and I punched into it mountain medicine, and I was about to hit enter, and I said, to hell with that. I'm going to punch in Himalayan medicine. And I did, and the first hit was the Himalayan Health Exchange. So I started reading about it. I called Ravi Singh, who was the founder of the organization, and he hooked me up with a doctor in Buffalo who was working up in northern India. And I actually met with him, and I met with one of the religious leaders up in Ladakh in northern India over the next 2 years and started raising funds to be able to go on a trip. And I went back to my hometown in Western New York, a real small town of, you know, around 1,000 people, and raised about half the money I needed to go on the trip, and went as a fourth-year medical student for 2 months and did 2 trips with the Himalayan Health Exchange, and then stayed on for another month and worked with a local surgeon up in Ladakh. And it was absolutely a mind-blowing experience. It was the first time I had really seen tons of tuberculosis, true tuberculosis cases. I pulled tuberculomas out of people's intestines, out of women's ovaries, out of women's uteri, and it dealt with tons of diseases that I had never seen before. Echinococcal cysts that we resected out of people and pulled out huge tapeworms while I was doing surgery, and saw all these cool things, and it really invigorated my interest in doing something different in medicine. And so it really just happened by happenstance that I happened to punch it into Google, and it became something that's really become an integral part of my life and has affected me deeply. And now I love sharing that with the other students and residents who come on the trips. So the area we go to is way up in northern India, if you can picture that on a map, up on the border of Tibet and China, Nepal, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And it's nestled in the multiple ranges of the Himalaya. we run 6 trips a year. The trips that I typically do are on foot out to the greater Himalayas. And then there are other trips that are vehicle supported that work in the inner Himalayan and outer Himalaya. And it really covers a diverse ecosystem. The north side of the Himalayas are blocked from the monsoons for the most part. And so it's a very arid, dry desert type environment with high glaciated peaks in the background. Whereas on the southern side of the Himalayas, it becomes more green. Initially, as you're heading south, pine tree, juniper, and then going down to a full-blown rainforest. And it really changes the way people live depending on their geographic location. So that is kind of the area we're dealing with. And the Himalayan Health Exchange, just so you have a little background, was formed by a guy who's become a good friend of mine now, Ravi Singh. He's originally from Himachal Pradesh, which is one of those northern hill states. And he finished school in Shimla, which is the old British capital of India, and got a degree in business, I believe, and started running an agency taking Westerners out to these cool areas. And after doing that for a few years, he realized he could give back so much more to the local people. And so he started running medical camps. He initially did it with a group of doctors, with the flying doctors for a few years, and then established relationships with some of those physicians and started running camps with physicians, residents, and students. And that grew into doing up to 8 or 9 trips a year and has now extended to covering an area that goes all the way out to the Kashmiri border, to the Tibet-Chinese border, up to the Pakistani border, and down to the outer Himalayas, where the Himalayas kind of meet the plains of India. And so it now covers 4 regions of the Indian Himalayas, and it has the authority of the Indian government, the Ancient Tribal Council of India, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama to provide medical care to Tibetan refugees and ancient tribal peoples of India. Through trekking and road-based travel, we take teams of 20 to 40 physicians, dentists, residents, and medical students and give them a rare opportunity to learn about the lifestyles of native people, and in return for that exposure to their culture, teach them the importance of health. Access into these areas is very difficult. There's about 3 months of the year that you can get in because of the amount of snowfall. So when we run a trip that goes in June, you're talking about going on roads that were just bulldozed out with 15-foot snowbanks on each side of the road. Avalanche hazard, landfall hazard, mudslides, roads being taken out, these are very commonplace. And so it's a very difficult area to access. And thus, it makes it difficult for us as an organization to have a continual impact. But we make do based on that geography with what we've come up with the Himalayan Health Exchange, which I'll explain further. So it's commonplace for roads to get wiped out and for us to have to rebuild them. It's commonplace for landslides to come off and for us to get blocked and have to reroute the entire trip. It's commonplace for us to have to put the whole team of 20 to 40 medical students, residents, and doctors to work to rebuild the road so we can get across a raging stream. And it's common to have road accidents. I've seen 2 buses full of Indian locals just go off the road where there's no guardrails and plunge into a glacial river and be taken off. And there are no survivors. It's very, very difficult terrain to travel in with high stakes. But for that risk that you take, you're afforded an absolutely beautiful place with amazing scenery of relatively new mountains that are carved by the forces of nature, by the wind and the rain and the snowfall. And the people have existed there for thousands of years and are able to create this existence with a true subsistent lifestyle where they are able to harvest off of the land through irrigation off of glacial streams and make their homes by hand, their clothes by hand, and collect dung from all of their animals to be able to heat their homes and heat their water to make their traditional yak butter salt tea and cook their food. And everything seems to be reused, recycled, and has a purpose. And it wasn't until the introduction of roads to those areas where the Western idea of life has really impacted that traditional way, which makes so much sense. And as I do those trips year in and year out, I've seen things change so much. The area is predominated by Buddhist influence. So you'll see Tibetan prayer flags, tortens or stupas, which are kind of pyramidal type structures which show a reverence to a high lama, and you'll see them all over the landscape. You'll also see mani walls, which are stone walls covered with Buddhist carved inscriptions of prayer, prayer wheels, and the people would traditionally be walking around wearing their woolen or silk garb and carrying Buddhist prayer beads as well. The mountains in the Indian Himalaya go up to a maximum of about 25,000 feet, so over 7,000 meters, the highest of which is the Nunkun Massif, which is right near where Ian and I were working this summer when he joined me on his trip. And it's just an absolutely beautiful area, covered by glaciers, covered by large mountains, with beautiful homes and beautiful monasteries tucked up into the cliff sides and the mountain sides. And the stars at night are absolutely amazing because there's very little air pollution. You're at high altitude and you're in a high desert area. So the stargazing is absolutely amazing. The culture, as I said, is predominated by the Buddhist religion. Every town has a religious leader, a medical leader, and a political leader. The area that I typically go to is actually very centered around women's rights, if you would say. They're very matriarchal. Women tend to have all the political power. They tend to be the political leaders of the villages. They allow polyandry and polygamy, depending on what's best for the villages, in terms of controlling the amount of people that will be in the villages. So, and they also allow polygamy or polyandry to make sure they take care of the men and the women based on needs, if somebody was going out to work or if somebody was disabled, etc. It all kind of makes sense there. And every morning, the three leaders, the medical, religious, and political leader, tend to get together and decide what they're going to do for the village that day in terms of sharing water, distributing food, etc. The Buddhist culture, for families that don't have enough means to really support their children, they have the ability to place their children into a monastery or into a nunnery to assure that they are fed and that they get an education. It's a very interesting and different society from what I was definitely exposed to in the West. Every village has a monastery, and each monastery has different ornamentation, which represents, in this area, Tibetan Buddhism. And there are some of the monasteries in the region we go to that are World Heritage Sites that are over 1,000 years old. Absolutely beautiful places. As you come out of the Himalayas and come down towards the Indian plains, Hinduism begins to mix in with the Buddhism. And the typical god that you see represented there is Shiva, and his female counterpart is Kali. So you'll see multiple Hindu temples on the roadsides representing those two goddesses. I kind of told you about their agrarian lifestyle. If you were able to see the slides that I had there, you'd see that they use everything possible in their environment to survive. Stone, shrub, stick, dung, everything has a purpose. Everything is used to be able to exist. Traditionally, that people make their clothes out of wool, and traditionally they weave the baskets to carry their children around and to carry all their goods, including the dung and including their produce. As they are agrarian, it really impacts what we see medically. The most common by far medical complaint is musculoskeletal, because these are farmers who are out working in the fields, doing everything by hand. When the first 15 years probably that I worked there, I never saw a mechanized form of harvesting. And now what I saw 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, there was one weed whacker in the valley that I've been going to for 15 years. Now every village had a weed whacker, gas-powered, of course. Traditionally, that was all done by hand. All harvest was done by hand, and you could feel on the patient's hands when you saw them how rough their hands were from pulling their peas and potatoes, etc. They harvest, and the harvest is usually done by the women and children, and the peas and barley and wheat are soaked and then sun-dried on tops of the roofs, and then they're put through a traditional mill. The mill will actually, Ian got to see one of these on his trip, traditionally run over a stream, which is wood paddled. It turns a big stone, which grinds up the barley or the pea into a flour, which is then mixed traditionally with their Tibetan yak butter salt tea, which makes sense to us macronutrient-wise, that they then get exposed to electrolyte, fat, and carbohydrate, and a little bit of protein. It all kind of makes sense. Talked enough about that. Oh, yak. And yaks are a vital source of life for the people there. This area, because it is so difficult to grow because of the high altitude and the environment being so arid, they do have the approval of the Dalai Lama to consume meat in this region, but they do so very rarely, only when they don't have enough other source of food, or if one suffers a natural death, they don't waste the animal. But mostly they're used for yak butter, yak milk, and yak cheese. So that's pretty much the society. Oh, and then we also, because a road is being built through this region, and roads have been built through the, obviously, the road access trips that we run, we see people who work the roads. The people who work the roads are traditionally from poorer states in India or Nepal, and they come up to work at high altitude where they can make a better salary in the summer months. So we see a lot of migrant workers from the states of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, et cetera, or Jharkhand. And those people, they don't have any protections from OSHA or anything like that. And so you see a lot of occupational injuries. For instance, the partial malabsorption with likely tough fracture that Ian got to take care of on his trip with us. People don't have any eyeglass wear to protect their eyes when they're out smashing rocks with a hammer all day long. There's lots of heavy equipment being operated without occupational protections for them. And so it adds an interesting element to the medical care as well. So our camps, how we access these people, I kind of explained. We go by road on 5 of the trips, and on the one trip we go on foot. The trip we go on foot, we travel 5 days from 13,500 feet over an 18,000-foot pass into a valley that's approximately 13,000 foot, and then provide medical care to all those from that valley who decide to show up to our clinic. They're notified ahead of time through the religious systems, through the monasteries, and through our connection with one of the religious leaders of that region that we will be coming. And because of that, we see, well over 50% of the inhabitants of the valley, only reduced by a on-the-spot visit by the Dalai Lama. So if the Dalai Lama shows up, the people tend to go see him instead of coming to see us. But once the Dalai Lama has left the valley, then they come back and get access to medical care from our remote medical camps. So we set up our tents outside of the villages, and then are usually greeted by the villagers as they know that we're coming into their village because they've been pre-notified. And then the next day we'll run a medical camp in their village. And the way I kind of explain that is that we're providing screening examinations. Of course, we'll see everybody with their primary complaint, but at the same time, I remind our team that we're there to try and catch the big thing. So somebody might come in and say they have a rash, and that might not necessarily be that difficult to take care of. But what I really focus on is trying to make sure that we take care of the people who have a surgical condition or an infectious condition that we can take care of, such as rheumatic heart valve or tuberculosis or leprosy. And so I really hammer that we need to pay attention to those things, and such that screening a population of, say, 1,000 people, you're going to help a lot of people a little bit, but you're really trying to find those few people that you're going to help a lot. And our organization has paid for 26 valve replacements over the last 20 years through identifying people with rheumatic heart disease out in these areas that otherwise would have been unidentified because of their barriers to access to care. And I may as well say now that we do that by sponsoring a surgical camp up in this region. So we don't bring in American doctors or European doctors to perform those surgeries. We identify those people and refer them to a surgical camp, which is completed by Indian physicians. But we as an organization help provide the wherewithal for those Indian physicians to get up to that area, provide their hotel, their food, etc., so that they can then volunteer their time to take care of their people. So I think it's a nice way of kind of interplaying us breaking down the barriers to access to care and then not degrading their own medical system. Because if any of you have had experience with Indian physicians or Indian trained physicians, their knowledge of medicine is on par, if not superior, to what mine is. And the surgeons I've worked with are on par with the surgeons, if not better than the surgeons I've worked with here in the United States. And they are by far capable of completing the task. It's a matter of the barriers to access in terms of geography, finances, etc., that prevent them from being able to take care of the people out in these remote regions. Told you about our religious leader. His name is Geshe Tenzin Nagawang. He is a kind of equivalent of a PhD in Tibetan studies who leads us into each village. Also, one of the cool things that Ian got to experience this past summer is that he'll take some of his top performing students from a school that he sponsors and take his top students and bring them on the trip. These are teenage students who are proficient in English, but also speak the local tribal language in the area that we go to. So they're able to provide us effective in medical interpretation and at the same time give them experience with healthcare in the hopes that they would then become healthcare providers themselves and also give them a sense of service if they weren't interested in medicine to take care of people from their own regions where they grew up. It's a pretty novel concept I haven't seen with other international medical organizations that I've been involved with. We also integrate with the traditional Tibetan system, which is called Amchi medicine. And for instance, the area of Zanskar, we as an organization have helped sponsor the Amchi there and helped pay part of his salary and provided his herbal medication, as well as left behind Western type over-the-counter medications for him to be able to distribute to the local people when we aren't there, which is the majority of the year. So we're talking typical medications that you'd be able to pick up at Walmart or Walgreens, et cetera. So topical antifungals, topical steroids, multivitamins, iron, Tylenol, ibuprofen, and then an H2 blocker or PPI. Simple medications that can have a big impact for the many. And I told you a bunch about education systems. One of the other cool things about this, besides seeing patients in a really cool place, is that we also run a lecture series in the evening. And one of the cool things for me, being a rural doc who's been up in remote Alaska for 16 years post-residency now, is that it gives me an opportunity to intensively teach medical students and residents from around the world. We have team members who come from Australia, New Zealand, US, Canada, all over Europe, Iceland, Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, France, Spain, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives you an interesting team dynamic where you can learn about different healthcare systems, and also gives me the opportunity to teach a bunch of people intensively all at the same time. Whereas my other opportunity would be to teach, an occasional medical student or an occasional resident. This really gives me an opportunity to give back to people. Not just the patients that I'm seeing, but the people who are going to be seeing patients in the future. Sometimes taking care of people can be kind of a conundrum. I've had an instance on a trip before where a Nepali monk came to our clinic. He was in extremis with respiratory distress. We have limited capabilities. So on our trips, we bring about $70,000 worth of U.S. medications, which are bought through MedCon, I think is the name of the organization, down in Atlanta, Georgia. You have a certain amount of medications there at your disposal, but it is definitely not the armamentarium that you'd have at a regular pharmacy in the United States or in a hospital-based pharmacy. And we gave him all we could, gave him steroids and antibiotics and albuterol nebs continuously for possible COPD exacerbation. We were able to get a 1 lead EKG at the time. That was the best technology you had for a portable unit. You can now get a 3 lead as far as I'm aware, or maybe even a 5 lead. But that was normal, so we doubted it was cardiac based on his lack of risk factors and a normal 1 lead EKG. And despite our treatments over an hour, we weren't able to make any improvement in this gentleman, and it was obvious he was progressing to respiratory failure. And that part of the trip, we were working with a local physician, and he declined to allow a Nepali citizen be admitted to his hospital. So the options were, we watch this man die, or we decide to defy that relationship with the Indian physician who would not allow him to be taken into his hospital. And so that's a tough call to make, because if you make the call to save one person's life, then you're going to lose that relationship to be able to come back to that area for the likely foreseeable future. But at the same time, it's one person's life. So I was stuck with that decision, and I carried this man who was progressing to respiratory failure in my arms out of the clinic and put him in one of our vehicles and took him to a larger hospital about a 3 hours drive away from where we were providing care. I know he was hospitalized. I don't know his ultimate outcome, but I know what his ultimate outcome, if he had stayed there, was going to be. Unfortunately, that then lost that relationship for us with that hospital in the future. We've never returned to that site. It's a difficult decision to make. I don't know if there's really a right or a wrong with it, but sometimes you have to make these decisions when you're the person who's in charge. And at the end of the day, it's something you have to sleep with, be able to sleep with, you know, and at this point now, 13 years later, I'm very comfortable with the decision that I made because I value that person's life that much. So it's not all cupcakes and roses, you know. It's not always cupcakes and rainbows. So there's multiple dimensions to the service we provide. We see patients. We sponsor this surgical camp that I spoke about briefly, and then we also support a bunch of schools, either Tibetan Children's Village schools, Himalayan Buddhist cultural schools, nunneries, monasteries with their monastic component, and then schools for children with intellectual disabilities as well. We ran a nonprofit for a while to help support 5 remote clinics, 2 of which were in Tibetan Children's Village schools, 1 which was in a Himalayan Buddhist cultural school, 1 was in a nunnery, and another one was in a monastery. But during the pandemic, things kind of fell apart and we disbanded. Fortunately, Ravi Singh, who is the founder of Himalayan Health Exchange, said, you know what, it'll just be easier if I just take care of those things on my own. And so those efforts have continued through his generosity, but not through a nonprofit status. Skip through that. So now that we've kind of gone through what I've done with Himalayan Health Exchange for the last 20 years, I'd kind of summarize the benefits of doing this. You know, the benefits, I'd say, are that we address the medical needs of the population. And one of the most important things, I think, and the way I explain this to students who are struggling with the concept of, you know, what are we doing here? And we aren't really saving the world or saving anybody here, is that what do you think is worse? To love somebody, to hate somebody, or to ignore somebody? And I would argue that the worst thing is to ignore somebody. Because if you love somebody, I mean, that's the ultimate good, right? If you hate somebody, at least you know where you stand. If you ignore somebody, you leave somebody completely alone. They have no idea you exist. And just by us going over there and showing compassion towards people and providing medical care, they know that people came a long way to show that they care about them. And we've been doing that for 26 years now. So it demonstrates that the outside world understands the plight of those people and instills a sense of solidarity and hope for their improvement potentially in the future. It also provides an opportunity for professional growth and an opportunity for personal growth. And the professional growth can come through the medical education that I spoke about, the legacy effect of paying it forward to students and residents, and the opportunity to really focus on people without all the distractions of the hospital-based system and armamentarium of diagnostics that we have in our typical workplaces. And it allows for a cross-cultural education and intensive usage of medical interpreters. It allows you to work on communication skills, especially with people with other languages. It requires you to be adaptive, flexible, develop a servant leader mentality, and to recognize the value of the patient's story. Also can help you to establish that ability to realize the benefit of establishing a relationship with the community and their needs so that you can more effectively serve them. And then, of course, it's not all perfect, right? There's going to be risks associated with that. The risks are that if you don't have a definitive mission established, a mission statement, you can have a limited impact, right? Especially if you're not sustainable, especially if it's a one and done type thing. There's a paucity of data on evaluation and follow-up of these patients. So, we love to study things in the American medical system, right? We have to study it to prove that it's any good. It's got to be evidence-based, but, how do you know if it's really good or not if you don't actually study it? Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. So some people don't like that. I'm not an academician, so for me to just go and take care of people, that's important. That's for other people to get in and do the number crunching. But there can be a downside to that, especially if you have somebody who isn't the strongest provider taking care of people, or with poor medical oversight, which can be a problem if you put students and residents into situations where they don't feel comfortable or aren't trained appropriately to provide the care that they're being asked to provide. Some people question the cost effectiveness of these organizations because of the amount of money that's dumped into it. Approximately $3.7 million US are spent annually on short-term medical missions or experiences in global health. That's a lot of cash, and could we spend it in better ways? I would argue no. I think it's important for students from around the world and residents from around the world to get these experiences, to see how the other half lives. It fundamentally changes how you take care of patients on a day-to-day basis, knowing how other people live. And I think it forces you to see the story behind a person. When you see somebody who just has lupus in general, you don't think about where they live. After you've seen somebody who burns dung to heat their tea in the morning and lives in a house made of mud, you think about where they come from and what they're going home to after you take care of them. We talked about the questionability of the quality of care. There's a lack of prevention in some of these programs. One of the big things is that you can undermine the local healthcare system depending on how you implement your care of the people. So a good example would be are the people where we're going to wait all year long to see us because we come in once a year, or will we encourage them to access their own healthcare system and actually get them to go so that we actually improve the healthcare system that they have access to already. Sometimes there can be culturally incongruent programming. I think that I've made a case that ours is not one like that. And another thing that can happen is you create parallel systems that disrupt the locally available systems. I think you've seen that we don't necessarily do that either. There's limitations in attaining standard of practice. What do you do with complications that happen after you leave the area? You can perpetuate power differentials by having the white man come in and save the day and then take off. And by overlooking evaluation and impact statements, you can have long-standing effects of these programs as well. Solutions on an individual level. I think as an individual who chooses to participate, you should understand that participation is a privilege. It's not a right of yours. And you should work under leadership that understands that, and work under leadership and direction of local community partners, and focus on the desired outcomes of the communities. We should also work on adequately preparing and deploying volunteers to these areas, and make sure that there are self-assessments and awareness of your level of training prior to and post experience. You should critically reflect on all stages of the experience, pre, during, and post, and consider the intentions of going to begin with, and develop culturally sensitive materials and related skills prior to departure. Biggest thing is don't participate in one and done programs. I mean, they just don't have the long-standing effect that you need to really make an impact in these places. And you can always consider alternatives, right? If it isn't your gig, there's other things to do. On a program level, I mean, you have to establish planning, follow-up, evaluation, manage the expectations of the community's participants, have a clear vision, build capacity for the program to grow, foster collaboration and partnership with the local healthcare system, and rigorously select people that participate, prepare them, train them, debrief them, and then monitor and evaluate. Kind of standard stuff. Then there are multiple things that can happen on a governmental level as well, in terms of visa requirements for medical expeditions, institutional policy changes, professional associations, endorsement of these types of experiences. and change of the host countries in terms of their view of whether these things are good for their country, for their people or not. And then certifications are something that could come down the pipeline as well. I think those things are all pie in the sky at this time. I don't know of anybody who's really enforcing or working towards those things at this time. And we certainly are not to that level of sophistication yet with the Himalayan Health Exchange. But regardless of that, I've thoroughly enjoyed my last 20 years of serving the people over in the Indian Trans-Himalaya. They're a beautiful people in a beautiful place with a beautiful way of life that unfortunately it's changing and changing rapidly. And all I can hope is to share that with the medical students and residents and other physicians and dentists who choose to participate in a trip with us. And I will continue to do so until the day that we aren't welcomed over in that area or we aren't needed anymore. Because it's definitely been something that's changed my life and made me a better person. And I hope that the people that participate in our trips feel the same. I think I'm about at time there, Ian, so I'll open it up for questions. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties, but hopefully they got the gist across.
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. I apologize, everybody. We couldn't get the slides up. I've been obsessively reloading that Google Drive folder, waiting for it to drop, and never came, unfortunately. But with your permission, Shawn, we'll post those slides when they come through when we post the recording, so everybody will have access to them. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves as well. I also have a handful of pictures from our trip this summer. Shawn, if you want me to share my screen, just get a small taste of what was going on.
Go for it.
All right. Let's see here. All right, let's move this. So just to give I'm hoping everybody can see this right now. And if you have questions, I will just be existing in the background. Feel free to go through the questions.
Yeah, we have a question here asking, Shawn, can you speak about how your experience has informed your practice in rural Alaska?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I originally, after residency, worked on Kodiak Island, which is about 250 air miles south of Anchorage, and worked with a predominantly non-native population there, but had a large Filipino population and a relatively large Hispanic-speaking population. And so the use of interpreters, the understanding of cultural, of socioeconomic impacts on healthcare definitely was rooted in my experience from my work over in the Himalayas. I'd say even more so now, the last 5 years, I've worked out in Western Alaska with the Yupik and Chupik people of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And the health conditions are very similar to what I see over in India. So we have the largest outbreak of tuberculosis, including multi-drug resistant TB in the United States, out where I work in Western Alaska now. And I just happen to see a ton of TB in India. We see a lot of dermatologic manifestations of poverty, a lot of gastrointestinal, pulmonary, cardiac manifestations of poverty. They are completely analogous to one another. And I think it's one of the reasons I enjoy my work out in Western Alaska now so much, because really I've been able to bring my joy of medicine to my work here in the United States. So I think that compassion for caring for people who live in different circumstances than you necessarily were raised or are currently living in, the ability to communicate, the use of interpreters, the understanding of the sociocultural context of the patient, and then the diseases that I've been exposed to as well has definitely made an impact on my practice. You won't hear this from many physicians anywhere at this time in America. I absolutely love where I work. I love going to work every day. Now, I don't work every day, but I love going to work when I go to work. It is absolutely fascinating. And that's really important for you guys to hear. I know there's at least, I don't know what the whole makeup is of everybody in the group, but I know at least Ian and Katrina are medical students, right? That's really important to hear. Somebody out there actually loves going to work. They love the work they do. That's really important.
I'm sold. I'll head right up to Alaska after residency. Thank you for answering that question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately, residency-wise, we don't have much up here in Alaska. We have a family practice residency in Anchorage, and we have a global health fellow program through the University of Washington, through their emergency medicine program. And then we also have a split pediatrics program through University of Washington, where people spend, they have an Alaska track where they spend half their time in Washington and half their time in Alaska. So it's definitely possible, but it's harder up here. We just don't have much residency support. But after residency, we are always looking for people, and there are absolutely fascinating places to work up here. And Alaska is a really small place. So if anybody who's on here ever has an interest, you through Ian, you'll have my contact information. If you want to know where to work, what jobs are available, what type of work might fit in with what you choose to do in the future, just get a hold of me, because that's how you really know where is going to be a good fit for you in the state of Alaska. You know, we're only 770,000 people, and I don't know every doctor in the state, but I know somebody who knows every doctor in the state. And I've been here long enough to know that. And if it's something you would consider to do fascinating work, it's really important to find a place that fits for you. You can make it happen. I think there's a couple other questions on there.
Shawn, real quick on that note, just because it makes for a really good segue, what is your Gmail one that we can drop for everybody? Because I have other people asking as well.
Yeah, ShawnVainio@gmail.com, no problem.
All right.
That's great. Ian will get that in the chat. One of the next questions is Carissa asking how to make global health a part of your career. Any insights about what specialties are helpful in pursuing this kind of work?
So making global health a part of your career, I think the hardest thing is the jobs that people choose, their job not letting them get away. So it's really important for you when you negotiate a contract to be able to negotiate for yourself to say, you know what, I'll take unpaid time to go do what I love, because I need to go do what I love in order to be able to do the work I do here that I might not necessarily love all the time. So let me put that into a more concrete picture for you. When I came to Alaska straight out of residency, I was a locum. I did 4 months. I left, and I went back to Salt Lake, grabbed all my stuff, and I qualified to go to Antarctica, and I went there for 7 months. And then I traveled around South America for a couple months, and I came back to Alaska as a locum for 6 months. And then, because I met my wife there in the interim in Kodiak, Alaska, I signed on a contract. But the contract I signed on, I didn't let them sign on, you get 2 weeks of vacation, you get 6 weeks of vacation or whatever. I signed a contract that said, you'll split 2 docs jobs with 3 people. So I get a third of the year off. So that 4 months that I choose to do in India every year, yeah, I'm not getting paid, but I can go do it. You won't restrict that time that I can use to go do what I love. And if I wanted to do 2 trips, I could do that, right? So I would, if I wanted, I had that time, I could do the work I love. The job I took after that, I took unpaid time. I wrote it in there. I said, you will give me 12 weeks of vacation, 4 weeks of it unpaid, 8 weeks was paid. I don't need that money. I need to go do what I love, so I'm fueled up to do what I enjoy. So you can make it happen. The hard thing, I think, is finding an organization that really, it coincides with what you believe in. That's the hard thing. And I was really lucky, right? I said it from the beginning. I just happened to punch in Google and found an organization I've been working with for 20 years. That is really lucky, right? I've worked with other organizations. They don't even come close to what I've been doing over there. So finding one that works for you and then making sure the contract that you sign will allow you to do it, that's the biggest struggle. Because there are tons of places in the world that could use your help. There are tons of places that have a need. And specialty-wise, it depends what you want to do, right? If you want to be a guy who goes out to remote regions like I do, I would argue that family medicine is the best way to do that, right? Ian will argue for you that it's ER internal medicine, combined residency, right? But I think in Ian saying that, he realizes that you need a little more than just the ER thing to be able to make an impact there, right? So it has to be really broad to make a big impact. But that being said, there's programs where you can make a huge impact being an ophthalmologist, being a general surgeon, being an orthopedic surgeon. All depends on the organization that you identify. So I'd say choose what you love first and then find the organization that'll make it work. And if you choose something that's strange, you've got my email now. Send me an email because I'll bet you I can find you somebody to match up with you. You know, from ophthalmologists to hemonc docs that I know who do work internationally. You know, there are people doing stuff, and there's always a need. There's a huge need worldwide. And there's the next one I think is from Jenna Kelly, who's in Australia. Good day. There are definitely trips going out next year. Ian, you should put in the thing HimalayanHealth.com. Just click on HimalayanHealth.com. It'll list off all the trips that are going out. I'll be going to Cargiac again next year, which is the trip that Ian did this past year, which is all on foot. Next year, we're going to do a combination vehicle foot trip to see more patients. But there are 6 trips, I believe, going next year. Paramedics definitely could be helpful. Your access to emergencies will not be very high, but in terms of seeing people, seeing a culture, and being able to help, I brought my wife, who's an artist, on a trip before, and she was able to triage, you know, get a set of vital signs to get the patients into the seat so we can see them, and she was able to help in pharmacy just to count pills out and help hand them out to the people who are lined up. So on a busy clinic day, we're seeing 300 patients a day. On the trip that Ian went on this summer, you know, we're seeing 15 to 60 patients a day in really small remote villages that are way out there. You're seeing 300 a day when you're in a children's school. 3 days, we'll see 900 people. We see every kid, every Tibetan refugee kid who's in the school. You know, so it all depends on the trip you go, how many you'll see, but there's always a need. And you don't have to necessarily be medical. You don't necessarily have to be a physician. And everybody has something to give to the team in terms of our knowledge and our life experiences that we bring prior to the trip. And everybody has something to learn. I think that hopefully you've gotten that from this talk already, that there is a ton to learn from the patients who present to you. Get involved. The phone number is listed on the Himalayan Health website in the upper right-hand corner, I believe. You give my buddy Ravi a call, say, hey, I listened to this talk by Shawn. I've known Ravi forever. His wife is from Buffalo, where I went to medical school, and he lived in Atlanta with his wife at the time where my brother was living. Our families are tight. My daughter and wife and I will go have dinner with him next week when we go down to see my family. He's a great guy who's committed to taking care of the people in this region. You just tell him, hey, I talked to Shawn and Ian put this thing together, and he'll take good care of you. Jonathan, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so I'm not going to slaughter it. Earliest level of medical experience. I think I just told you that. We have tons of first and second year, or students between first and second year, and pre-medical students who have come on trips before. And although it can be kind of tough, right, because you aren't as honed in your medical experience, I think there is a ton to be learned from taking a history, from exposure to medical illnesses that you aren't necessarily going to see a bunch of in the United States, and learning and working on communication skills. So I would encourage any level of medical experience to go. The only reason I didn't go as a first year, based on my talk, I said I waited till my 4th year of medical school to go because I didn't have any money, right? I didn't come from a family with a lot of cash, and it took me a couple of years to raise the money to go on that first trip because I come from a really small town. People aren't throwing a lot of money around, right? If I could have raised that money the first year, I would have been gone between my 1st and 2nd year of medical school. But that wasn't the reality for me. So I would say go when you can go. Jonathan Thompson, how possible is it to time a medical student's trip with his dentist father? Both of us are very interested. Oh, it's very possible. You figure out your schedule. If you're between your 1st and 2nd year, 2nd year, 3rd year, that's going to be your summertime. Tell your dentist father to come along. We always could use a dentist 100%. And if it's in your 3rd or 4th year, you just need to coordinate. Check out the Himalayan Health website.
The dentist would be a very popular individual over there.
Oh, yeah. And then Vishwanath, I should definitely have a chat with them. I'm a paramedic. Yes, you definitely should.
Yeah.
I think
so,
those are all the questions, unless I missed something in there.
Nope, I think you got all of them, at least from my track. Yeah, so thanks, Shawn, again for coming around. Sorry, everybody, that the technology was a little whoopsie daisy. But like I said, we'll try and get the we'll get the actual PowerPoint in as soon as it comes through. We'll upload this talk, have Shawn's email in the chat, and I hope everybody learned some good stuff. I can very much 100% vouch for everything that Shawn has said this past hour. It is a very valuable experience. You learn a lot, especially as a American med student going over and then, you know, seeing all of the things that you do see, which you're never going to see on this side of the either pond, so to speak. A really great experience. Plan to go again. All
Well,
right.
thanks for having me, Ian, and we look forward to having you back.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming along. All right. Good night, everyone. Yeah, Shawn, sorry about all the technicals with that.
Oh, it happens, man. I'm used to it.
Yeah. Oh, you said you're up at a ski resort right now?
I'm in Girdwood, so I'm surprised it didn't work. But a couple times when we were trying to do it, it said that my internet connection was weak. So I've never had that happen before while I was trying to Zoom.
Gotcha. Yeah, because
But
I know you,
the
I know
best
you
laid
ran
plans of Mike man. Yeah.
yeah, because I was like, oh, he ran the whole like conference thing. This shouldn't be a problem. And then here we are.
Yeah.
And you said you just got back hunting from Wyoming?
Yeah. My buddy from Kodiak had 500 acres of land given to him in Wyoming. So I've been going down the past 3 years to go hunt with him.
Nice. Did you get anything while you're
Yeah.
there?
No success. I had a mule deer tag, but I didn't find any mature mule deer. I was about 35 yards from a 6x6 Rocky Mountain elk, but didn't have a tag, so I just got to watch him.
Watching is still good fun.
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it's just fun to be in the outdoors and good to spend time with my buddy. He's 66 years old and has bad neuropathic pain after a spinal cord injury and leukemia and a bunch of other medical issues. So it's good to spend time with him. And then the guy who gave him the land's 83 years old, and so it's good to spend time with him as well. So yeah, getting a deer
That's
would just
fair.
be, a cherry on top. It's mostly about spending some time with some old boys.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, thanks for coming along for the chat. I'm again sorry for all the time mix-ups and time zones are doing me dirty, especially now with residency interview season. So I
Yeah, I can
apologize for that.
understand. I'm sorry I couldn't. I tried to prevent this problem from happening with the technology, so that's why I was trying to send you this earlier. But because of the size of the file, it wouldn't send.
Yeah, it's all good. I imagine
And it looks
the
like,
internet connection is also playing with the upload.
yeah, and it looks like it's saying it's too big to add it to the drive now also.
That's a first.
And it's 112 megs, I think.
Huh. And that's like, yeah, that's like just over the email limit. Like, I don't think I've ever seen something be too big for a drive folder before.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, whenever you end up getting it, I'll be sure to throw it in so everybody can see all the pictures because it looked like you had quite a few and really awesome ones on there.
Yeah, it's really, it says not enough storage.
Interesting.
And this is in the GOMI presentation one. It says not enough storage.
Huh. Okay. I'll figure out something else because I have access to a couple of like drop boxes and box accounts as well. So I'll figure out something
Sounds good.
to upload it. Oh, also, I don't know if you've ever seen the Starry Night photo that I took like before my camera died.
No.
But it won a photo contest at ASAP actually, which I was really happy with.
Oh, awesome, man. Can you throw it up right now or no?
Yeah, let me find it real quick. Da, 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 da. I totally wasn't expecting it, and they like emailed me like a week after ASAP, and they were like, "Hey, by the way, like this won a photo contest," and I was like, "What?" Oh wait, actually, it's this one. Share screen. This. if you can see this one at all. This is like the Instagram version, so the quality is not as great, but
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Sweet.
yeah, it was like the third last photo on the camera reel before it died.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was
Yeah.
good talking with you.
Well,
I'll let you get back.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've
I'll,
actually got my high school wrestling coach from Cheektowaga is here with his wife and son, so they're visiting right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I'll let you go have an entertaining time with them. I'm sure they're enjoying Alaska.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for having me
Absolutely.
on. Sorry things didn't go smooth, but that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it's the way it be. Incredible India, right?
Yeah.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, man. See ya.